When was the last time you were bored? Not tired, not distracted, not scrolling through something while half watching something else. Actually bored. Sitting with nothing to do and no way to escape it. Just you and your own thoughts and the unbearable weight of an empty afternoon. You probably can't remember. And that's not a coincidence. That specific feeling, the one you've spent years trying to avoid, the one that made you reach for your phone before you even realized you were reaching, is the feeling that built the human mind. And in the last 2 decades, we have almost completely engineered it out of existence. Here's what nobody tells you about boredom. It is not a flaw in your design. It is not your brain failing to find something useful to do. Boredom is a signal, a very specific, very deliberate signal that evolution spent millions of years building into you. And that signal has one meaning. It means think, not react, not consume. For most of human history, boredom was inescapable. You couldn't avoid it. There was no feed to scroll, no episode to queue, no notification to chase. When the sun went down and the fire burned low and the day's work was finished, there was nothing, just darkness and time and the inside of your own head. And that is where everything came from. Not from necessity, the way we usually tell the story. Not from hunger or fear or survival pressure alone. From stillness. From the long, uncomfortable hours when humans had nothing to do but sit and think about the world they lived in and wonder if it could be different. In 2019, researchers at the University of Virginia published a study that most people found almost unbelievable. They put participants in a room with nothing in it. No phone, no book, no window, just a chair and their own thoughts. They were told to sit for 15 minutes. Most couldn't do it. In fact, a significant portion of participants chose to give themselves mild electric shocks rather than sit alone with their thoughts. They had been told the shocks were unpleasant. They had already experienced one and confirmed they didn't like it. And still, when faced with 15 minutes of uninterrupted silence, they pressed the button. Think about what that means. We would rather hurt ourselves than be alone with our own minds. That is not a personality quirk. That is a measurement of how completely we have lost the ability to tolerate the one cognitive state that built us. But here's what's strange. Boredom is not passive. That's the part scientists spent decades getting wrong. When your brain enters a state of genuine, unescapable boredom, it doesn't go quiet. It activates. A network of regions that neuroscientists call the default mode network lights up in a way that almost no other mental state produces. The medial prefrontal cortex, the posterior cingulate cortex, these are not the regions associated with rest. These are the regions associated with imagination, self-reflection, future planning, and creative connection. In 2009, researchers at the University of British Columbia discovered that the default mode network consumes more energy than almost any other brain state. Your brain works harder when you're staring at a wall with nothing to do than it does processing most tasks you give it. This is the engine. This is what humans were doing around those fires for 300,000 years. Not resting, thinking, connecting ideas that had no obvious connection, imagining futures that didn't exist yet, running simulations of other people's minds, building what we eventually called culture, religion, mathematics, and art. Every one of those things began as a thought that had nowhere useful to go. And the history of human invention is full of moments that prove it. Isaac Newton, and he started thinking about why things fall at all. Not what to do about it, not how to use it, just wondering. Idly, the way you only wonder when there's nothing else demanding your attention. Archimedes was sitting in a bath. Darwin spent years doing what his contemporaries considered embarrassingly little, walking, thinking, staring out of windows. Einstein called his thought experiments his most important tool, not the mathematics, the idle imagining, the sitting with a question and letting the mind go wherever it wanted. These were not accidents. These were the default mode network doing exactly what it was built to do, making connections between things that had no obvious connection, finding patterns in the silence that would have been invisible in the noise. And then we solved boredom, or we thought we did. The first blow came gradually, Electric light extended the day and compressed the silence. The screen was over there. You were over here. There was still friction. Still moments between things. The second blow was the one we didn't recover from. In 2007, something changed. The smartphone arrived, not as a device, but as a permanent escape hatch from the present moment. Every second of potential boredom, the elevator, the waiting room, the 2 minutes before someone arrives, was now fillable. Instantly, infinitely, the gap between thought and distraction collapsed to almost nothing. And here is what that cost us. In 2023, researchers tracked more than 80,000 people and found something genuinely hard to believe. The average time a person could focus on one thing without switching had dropped from 2.5 minutes in 2004 to 47 seconds. Not because people got less intelligent, but every app, every feed, every platform on the device in your pocket is built around one principle: interruption. Not because interruption is good for you, because interruption keeps you scrolling, and scrolling generates data, and data generates money. The business model and the cognitive cost are quite literally the same thing. But it's not just attention that's declining. The cognitive skills collapsing fastest are a specific cluster. Abstract reasoning, working memory, the ability to hold several ideas in your mind simultaneously and find the connection between them. The ability to stay with a problem when the answer doesn't come immediately. Those are not random skills. Those are the skills of the default mode network. Those are exactly the skills that boredom was designed to build. And they are, specifically and measurably, the skills we are no longer practicing. Because here's what almost no one says out loud. It requires boredom to develop properly. In children especially, the brain builds this network through repeated exposure to unstructured time, through the experience of having nothing to do and being forced to generate something from nothing. In 2018, developmental psychologists studying childhood play found that the single strongest predictor of creative thinking in adults was the amount of unstructured, unsupervised, genuinely boring time they had as children. Not educational programs, not enrichment activities, boredom. The boring summer afternoons with nothing to do and no one telling you how to fill them. We have scheduled those out of existence. Children today move from structured activity to screen time, to homework, to screen time again. The spaces between, the long, itchy, uncomfortable gaps that were actually building something, are gone. And the adults those children are becoming are measurably less capable of the thinking that those gaps were nurturing. Supposed to produce. This is not a generational complaint. This is not nostalgia. This is data. The same data that tells us the line is heading in one direction, and that the direction it's heading has never mattered more than it does right now. Because the skills declining fastest in humans are the same skills improving fastest in the systems we're building to replace us. So here is what this actually comes down to. You are living through a moment when the rarest cognitive resource on Earth is not intelligence. It is not education. It is not access to information. It is the willingness to be bored, to sit with an unresolved thought, to let your mind wander without pulling it back, to tolerate the specific discomfort of having nothing to distract you, and choosing deliberately not to reach for the escape. That 15-minute experiment, the empty room, the chair, the silence. That is not a torture chamber. That is what your brain was built for. That is where every idea you have ever had that was actually worth having came from. The moment just before the thought arrived, when there was nothing there yet. The campfire burned low, the world went quiet, and in the silence, something moved in the human mind that had never moved before. We traded that for a notification, and most of us haven't sat still long enough to notice it's gone.